Hello there, lovelies. It's Stephanie from Oh You're Lovely, where we carry the largest selection of wood flowers in the United States. It's another deep dive. We're going to be working with the Cabbage Rose. So excited. We use this one quite a bit in different assortments. We love it so much. And as a special treat, we're going to show you how to dye them using an airbrush, but we're going to use some different materials than we have in the past. It should be a good time. I think it'll work. So I've already got my hands dirty, so hopefully it works. All right, let's go do this. A little bit about the Cabbage Rose. This lovely flower comes in two sizes. We have a 2.5 and a 3-inch. The petals itself are very similar to our poppy, except for the center is different. It's got this real cool ruching center detail. A lot of the time we like to do something like this, where we have a hot pink center and a lighter pink outer. So we're gonna do something similar to that, and I'll talk you through how to do something like this pretty dang easily. And then we're going to also chat a little bit about airbrushing, answer some of the most frequently asked questions, and then we're gonna play with some new, we're gonna play with watercolor, liquid watercolor. We're gonna try it in the airbrush and see what happens, along with some other techniques. So come on and join me, this should be fun. Before we start airbrushing, let's talk about all of the different materials that you need for an airbrush and some of those frequently asked questions. So first thing you need is an airbrush gun. This is from Grex, G-R-E-X. This is a little bit more of an upgraded product, company, brand. I've used, I believe it's Air Master airbrushes. I might be wrong with that, but I'm pretty sure we have them linked in our Amazon links of the ones we've used. I used those for quite a few years, and then our warehouse staff does all of the dyeing of our different assortments and stumbled upon this particular airbrush, and they've never looked back. They really, really enjoy it, and they use it a lot. So I myself got one as well for when I'm airbrushing. I also have, now this isn't necessary in terms of this way, but it just is helpful. This is where you can spray all of your leftover paint inside to clean it up. I also run my cleaner then through and push it through here, and it's a waste jar. It just compacts everything and has a little filter on it. But you can also just spray out all of your waste onto a piece of paper or into a cup or whatever you want. The next thing you're going to need is, and I have this plugged in so I don't want to pull it too far, but a air compressor of sorts. You don't need a big massive air compressor. That one I got at, Harbor Freight. I did get an air compressor way back, like 6+ years ago, from Amazon, and the motor burned out like immediately. It was really weird. So I have never repurchased an air compressor via Amazon, but the one I got from Harbor Freight I've had for 5 years now, 4 or 5 years. And it is still kicking and doing really, really well. And it's nice and tidy and compact, and I can just set it aside when I'm not using them. Now, when it comes to the actual dye that you're gonna put in your airbrush, now this is my personal opinions only. You can do what you want with your own tools. Just gonna put that out there. I personally only will put acrylic craft paint mixed with an airbrush medium through my airbrush. I will put High Flow. Golden has a brand or a style called High Flow, which is a high pigment but very thinned out, so it goes straight through an airbrush without any issue. And then I also will use paint that is specifically made for airbrushes. Some people do like to use latex or house paint. That is completely up to you. I personally don't. I feel like the particles of that paint are a little bit too large to pass through a teeny, teeny, tiny little needle that is the airbrush, and over time it's going to clog up your airbrush. The other thing I will say is I have never and never will put glycerin through my airbrush. It would probably go through without a problem, but the issue is the cleaning afterwards, and there's a higher chance of you gunking up. The airbrush in particular, the hardest thing about working with an airbrush is the cleaning and making sure that you don't clog it up. And some of those more affordable models, you can run them quite a bit, clean them quite a bit, and after a while though, you need to replace it because it is not gonna be able to get cleaned enough where it's not clogging up. So you wanna make sure as soon as you're done airbrushing, you are cleaning it out with I personally like to use an airbrush cleaner. I believe some people use Windex and things like that, but I've always just used and I don't have, oh, right here. Nope, that's not it either. Here's my medium, but I also, Iwata, I think is the name of the brand, is a big airbrush company. I get their cleaner in particular to clean out my airbrush. The airbrush medium I was talking about, there's a couple different brands. Liquitex, I want to say, is the name of the other brand. Golden has one. And basically what you're going to do is I always use little medicine cups and I put a little bit of craft acrylic paint in and mix it with the airbrush medium. I don't have a true ratio. I'm just kind of making it look like not chocolate milk, but like milk as far as the consistency. It's thinned out, but it's not as thin as water, if that makes sense. It's just a visual. I'm sure there's a good measurement somewhere out there in the internet, world void cloud. I don't know. It's somewhere. I'm sure somebody who knows a lot more than I do about airbrushing probably has figured out the best ratio for them. I just eyeball it. But I don't water it down with water. And the reason why, and you probably could, and still be pretty okay with it as far as cleaning and stuff. The reason why I don't water it down with paint to thin out the paint, or the reason I don't use water to thin out the craft acrylic paint is because the more water you're adding, the less the color is going, you're watering down the color as well. So it's going to be lightened and it's not going to be as opaque. So I like to use the airbrush medium because that's not going to affect the color as much. If you don't even want to mess with that, the high flow from Golden, like I had mentioned, is a great option. It is on the pricier side as far as for art supplies compared especially to craft acrylic paint, but a little bit goes a long way and it's going to stay super high pigmented and there's nothing else you need to do. You can just put it straight into your airbrush and you're good to go. Now, I did just do a little bit of research because I have a whole bunch of different liquid watercolor. I'm going to try to run it through. Is that going to be a mistake? I don't know. I really hope it's not, but live and learn. Let me find out if it's a mistake and then you don't have to ruin your airbrush. But I think we're going to be fine. I think we are. And I'm not going to put any other mediums or anything like that because it's thin enough to go through my airbrush. Okay, that was a lot of chit-chatting. So while I was chit-chatting that whole time, I hope that was educational and not boring. But now we're going to get to the fun stuff, and that is just dyeing a bunch of these flowers and trying it out. So let's do that. As a reminder, this is the color story that we're working on with this batch of flowers. Y'all voted on that on our Instagram stories as the color. Here are the flowers we're going to work with. So I am going to take some already pre-dyed ones and add some additional color to them. I also like to put all of my flowers when I'm airbrushing on a bamboo skewer. It's just a little heavier in terms of like, there's a little bit more to grab onto. I don't know why, it's just a personal preference. You could just use wire stems, but I have the bamboo skewers and I always use them for that. As you can see, that was like a Halloween dyeing stuff because I just put a black on top of everything, which maybe we'll talk about that too in a little bit, of how to just spookify some flowers real quick. All right, that should cover all of the questions maybe. I won't be wearing a mask, but that's probably a really good idea if you're going to be doing this indoors or have some sort of thing to catch all of the spray. I do have a spray booth area, but it is it's hard to get to right now. Not good, not good. I will be handling the craziness that is this studio soon enough, but it is not today. So, all right, that's everything. I'm done talking. Let's just get to dyeing some of these flowers. First up, we're going to use the high flow from Golden. I did mix a bunch of colors. I didn't have a purple, so I mixed red, a couple blues, and white in here to get this color. Does it match our color story? I mean, yeah, kind of close. We'll see once it gets on the flowers what it actually looks like. And I'm going to be using this as my little reservoir. There's lots of different attachments. This is just the one I have right now. So that's the one I'm going to use. And this is why I like to use medicine cups, because you can kind of fold them and then dump your paint in. Put that on. And the other reason why I like having this little guy is you can also use it as a stand to hold while you're adjusting. Okay, let's do this. I'm saying that a lot today. I still have about half of that to go. And I've done 3 flowers and kind of a different details. To clean the airbrush, so I've poured out the extra paint that I don't want to use anymore. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just put in the new color and let it just kind of transition from one to the other. But since I'm going to be switching this from an acrylic paint to a watercolor, I'm not going to do that. So here's my airbrush cleaner. I'm just going to pour it in there. And then I'm going to slide. I'm gonna take off my little and we're just gonna run it through a couple different times until it's nice and clean, and then we'll switch to the next art supply. All right, it's airbrush time. Now the 2 brands I'm gonna be using, Dick Blick has their own brand of liquid watercolor. We've used this in the past differently. And then I also had this in my stash, Ecoline. Oh, there we go. Ecoline liquid watercolor. And this one is in the color, what color is this? Rose Pastel. This is magenta, which is going to be close to the color story we've got going on, I think. And then for the purples, I pulled, this is a pastel violet, so I'm guessing a lighter purple, and this one is just called violet. So we'll see how those look different. Just like anything else, you can mix and match some of the colors. Brands too probably doesn't matter, but I'm gonna stick for one-to-one kind of thing, and I'm not gonna mix and match the different colors. I'm just gonna add, I'm not gonna do a full cup of that. We're just gonna put a little bit in there, and let's see how this goes. I just put some turquoise in the reservoir. I'm not going to clean it, so it's going to transfer from the pink to the blue. I don't know how turquoisey this is going to be, but I'm going to put it right on top of this flower because we've been doing some mixing and matching of colors, so we'll see what happens. Let me explain what we're gonna do with this one. I've already sprayed it down with a little bit of water to open up the petals. I just took the Dick Blick's liquid watercolor in magenta, and I'm going to spray half of it, I think. Yeah, we'll do like half of it. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna mix the purple into a certain section and then all purple on the other side. And then what I wanna do is I want to grab what was it called? Rubbing alcohol from last week's tutorial and see what happens with using liquid watercolor plus the alcohol, rubbing alcohol, see what all happens. Okay, that's the gist of it, so let's do this. Oh, and the reason why these petals all have like a little bit of color already to them, my hands are super dirty and I was opening up the flowers with paint on my hands. All right, that should cover everything. Let's do this. I'm not really sure what's going to happen with this, but here in this bottle is just rubbing alcohol. I just want to see what's going to happen. I think it's similar to with doesn't seem. Doesn't seem to, well, it kind of helps blend in a little bit more, the two colors. I'm not getting quite the same reaction as when we were doing craft acrylic paint. I feel like there was a little bit more of blending, but it could also be the colors, but it definitely
open that up a little bit. We gotta do something about that now that let's do this. I'm gonna spray that there. We're just gonna see what happens. Let's get some color in our airbrush and we'll see. I grabbed some turquoise just because. Well, that was the only reason, just because. I like too that there's cream peeking through. I feel like it gives it some more kind of dimension, but if you didn't, you could just pull them aside like this and then airbrush in that direction too. Good golly. I think right here is the only spot I don't love, so I'm just kind of from the back. Go. Well, I'll be. It's giving midnights, isn't it? Okay, so the last thing we're gonna try is this is already a dip dyed with craft acrylic paint. I have the turquoise watercolor in here and we're gonna put it on top, and then I might do like half and half, put some rubbing alcohol on one side and see if it does anything. Just because I'm still curious.
There you have it, airbrushing the Cabbage Rose using for a twist watercolor, liquid watercolor, and I think I might like this better than doing craft acrylic with the airbrush medium. But I think it just depends on what your work and what you're doing and why you're doing it and all that stuff. But here's some of the breakdowns. And I don't know if the camera's gonna pick it up as easily as it is in person, but here are, so this one was done with Golden High Flow, which is a craft acrylic, or it's an acrylic paint similar to craft acrylic. So this is gonna be the same kind of vibe as if you were using craft acrylic paint mixed with airbrush medium. Oh, there's a lot of words, but it's much more like matte, I feel like, compared to the watercolor. The watercolor, it saturates everything and it's a very vibrant color, or it can be light, kind of like this one was that light pink. It gives just a softer feeling, and it reminds me of, because I played around with this, it reminds me of what we were doing with the rubbing alcohol on the last tutorial, where it kind of like blended and I want to say floated, but it's not. It just is a softer feel, whereas that purple at the end still is a little bit more matte. And then this is just the regular watercolor. So we've got craft acrylic using rubbing alcohol to fade it out. This is the Golden High Flow, and this was the watercolor. So there's a couple little differences. Now the rubbing alcohol, I didn't really notice any kind of great difference as far as blending the colors, similar to, or it was better with craft acrylic paint to mix in those colors versus and maybe it's with it being airbrush, because those were being dip dyed and hand painted. So maybe there's just more paint and medium to do that. I'm not sure. I'll have to play around a little bit more, but when it comes to airbrushing, it's very thin particles just spraying out onto the flower to cover them, versus when you're painting or dip dyeing, you're fully saturating. So there might be a reason for that as well. But I will say you can easily take the watercolor and put it on top of the pre-dyed. So if you wanted to just add your details with an airbrush and use the watercolor and then dip dye everything to save a little bit on the paint, using craft acrylic paint watered down and dip dyeing those and then adding the watercolor. You could also then, what I would suggest, you're already gonna have the glycerin in there too, so you don't have to worry about the flowers getting brittle. That was the one thing I forgot to mention, as besides the fact that I never put glycerin into my airbrush, I don't find that it's actually usually needed. The flowers stay soft because it's not being saturated by thick, heavy paint. It's just being kind of dispersed evenly across. But if you find that your flowers are still a little crunchy after you've airbrushed them, you can take a glycerin water mix in a water bottle and just spritz them down a little bit, and that will help soften them back up. But I do that after I've airbrushed and I'm feeling the flowers if they feel a little crunchy or potential crunchiness happening. Okay. Well, this was fun. I have a ton of liquid watercolor. I've only done it as painting and dip dyeing. I've never run it through the airbrush. I might be doing that instead on a very regular basis. The other thing too, before you put a color on the flowers, if you're not 100% sure what it's gonna look like, grab a piece of paper. And also that's a great way to practice too with an airbrush, is paper or some sort of box or something, just getting used to the trigger, because you can kind of do a small and then how much when you bring it back towards the flower, all of that stuff. There's all different techniques that you can practice doing that on paper or boxes or something else too before you start playing with your flowers. That way too, you can find out some cool color combinations and things like that. Okay, lots of talking. Now, if you're interested in learning more about or getting yourself some of these lovely, lovely cabbage roses, you can go over to ohyourlovely.com and I have a coupon code for you. Use the code YouTube30 to get 30% off one regular priced order. If you're loving this channel, can't get enough, love these deep dives of flowers and techniques and making all sorts of different things with the wood flowers, this is the channel to subscribe to for sure. If you'd like to, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell so you're notified every time a new video goes up, which is typically once a week. All right, guys, I will see you next week for another tutorial. I'm Stephanie from Oh You're Lovely, and you, my friends, are absolutely lovely. Bye, guys. I'm gonna go wash my hands now. Soap and water, that's all you need, soap and water. But if you don't like your hands getting messy, put on some gloves. But, yep.